They told me to help in the kitchen at my own cousin's wedding. What they forgot was simple. I wasn't just a guest. I was the one paying for everything. And when you control the money, you control everything else. My name is Madison Carter, and I'm 28 years old. For the past 6 years, I've worked as a financial analyst at Morrison & Associates in downtown Chicago. I make good money, really good money, the kind that lets you live comfortably, save for the future, and apparently, fund other people's fairy tale dreams. But let me back up. This story doesn't start at the wedding. It starts 18 months earlier when my cousin Emma called me crying at 2 in the morning. "Madison, I need your help," she sobbed into the phone. "Tyler proposed, and his family? They expect everything to be perfect. The venue alone is $15,000, and that's just the deposit. Emma Richardson has always been the golden child of our family. 2 years younger than me, blessed with the kind of effortless beauty that makes strangers stop and stare. Blonde hair that catches light like spun gold, blue eyes that photographers dream about, and a smile that could sell anything to anyone. While I was studying for my CPA certification and working 60-hour weeks, Emma was floating through life on charm and other people's generosity. That's a lot of money," I said, rubbing my eyes and checking the clock. "Have you talked to your parents? You know Dad's been struggling since the plant closed, and Mom's working double shifts just to keep the house." Her voice cracked with practiced vulnerability. "Tyler's family has money, but they're old-fashioned. They expect the bride's family to handle the wedding costs. If I can't pull this together, I'll lose him, Madison. I'll lose everything." That's how it started, $15,000 for the venue deposit. Then $12,000 for catering upgrades because Tyler's family only eats organic. $8,000 for flowers because we can't have grocery store arrangements. $6,000 for the band because a DJ isn't sophisticated enough for the Wellingtons. Each request came with tears, promises to pay me back, and increasingly elaborate stories about how Tyler's family would judge me, if everything wasn't absolutely perfect. Tyler Wellington III came from the kind of old Chicago money that built museums and had streets named after their ancestors. His great-grandfather founded Wellington Industries, and the family still owned a significant stake in half the commercial real estate downtown. When Emma brought him to family dinner 6 months after they started dating, I could see the dollar signs in her eyes. He was handsome in that understated way wealthy men often are. Tailored clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, but worn casually. Dark hair, strong jawline, and the kind of confident posture that comes from never doubting your place in the world. He was polite to our family, asking thoughtful questions about Uncle Robert's construction business and complimenting Aunt Sarah's cooking. But I noticed things, the way his eyes assessed our modest dining room, how he paused slightly when Emma mentioned she was between jobs, the almost imperceptible tightening around his mouth when our cousin Joey told a slightly off-color joke. "Tyler's family has very high standards," Emma confided to me later that night. "His mother already thinks I'm not good enough. If our wedding isn't absolutely flawless, it'll confirm everything she suspects about my background." That's when the real pressure started. Madison, the Wellington women all went to private schools. They summer in the Hamptons. They're used to a certain level of refinement. Emma's voice carried a new tone I'd never heard before, a mixture of desperation and growing pretension. "Tyler loves me, but love isn't always enough in families like his." I should have seen the warning signs. The way Emma started dropping casual comments about my apartment being quaint when she'd always loved my downtown loft before. How she began suggesting I shop at different stores when we went out together. The subtle corrections to my grammar, even though I have a master's degree and she barely finished community college. But family is family, right? And I had the money. My career was going well. I lived below my means, and I'd always been the responsible one, the one everyone came to when they needed help. It felt natural to step up. By month 12 of wedding planning, I'd invested $45,000, not lent, invested, because Emma had made it clear that asking for contracts or payment plans would be insulting and show that I didn't trust her. "Madison, you're like a sister to me," she'd say whenever I brought up the mounting costs. "Sisters don't need paperwork between them. When Tyler and I are married, you'll be family to the Wellingtons too. You'll get it all back and more." I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because the alternative that my own cousin was using me was too painful to consider. The week before the wedding, everything changed. Emma called me with one final emergency. The rehearsal dinner location had fallen through, and she needed another $8,000 to secure a replacement venue worthy of the Wellington standards. "It's the Fairmont, Madison, the Fairmont. Tyler's grandparents had their anniversary there. His mother specifically mentioned how meaningful it would be to continue the tradition." I wrote the check. $53,000 total, enough for a down payment on a house, enough for a new car and a vacation to Europe, enough to change my life in a dozen different ways. Instead, I'd bought my cousin a fairy tale. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the Riverside Country Club at 8 a.m. to help with final preparations. I'd arranged to take photos with the family, planned to enjoy watching Emma's dream day unfold, and looked forward to finally meeting the extended Wellington family as Emma's beloved cousin, the one who'd made it all possible. Emma was in the bridal suite, surrounded by 3 bridesmaids, a makeup artist, and her mother. She looked absolutely stunning in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, a dress I'd helped pay for. "Madison!" she called out when she saw me. "Perfect timing. Could you run down to the kitchen and check on the catering setup? I want to make sure everything's exactly right." It seemed like a reasonable request. I knew the details better than anyone since I'd been coordinating with the vendors for months. I headed downstairs and spent an hour ensuring everything was perfect. The ice sculptures were positioned correctly, the champagne was properly chilled, the flowers matched the color scheme exactly. When I returned to update Emma, the energy in the room had shifted. Tyler's mother, Margaret Wellington, was there along with 2 other impeccably dressed women I assumed were his aunts. They were all smiling and chatting, but there was something in their posture that felt exclusive, like a circle I wasn't quite invited to join. "Madison, there you are," Emma said with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Wellington, I'd like you to meet my cousin Madison. She's been such a help with the wedding preparations." "How lovely," Mrs. Wellington said with the kind of polite smile wealthy people perfect for dealing with service providers. "It's always wonderful when family pitches in." "Madison works in finance," Emma added quickly like she was trying to establish my credentials. "She's been absolutely invaluable in helping coordinate all the vendor relationships." The way she said it made me sound like a wedding planner rather than the family member who'd made the entire event possible. But I pushed down the uncomfortable feeling and focused on the joy of the day. "I'm happy I could help make Emma's dream wedding come true," I said warmly. "Oh, how sweet," one of the aunts murmured. "It must be so satisfying to see your hard work pay off." There was something in her tone that bothered me, but before I could analyze it further, Emma was ushering me toward the door. "Madison, would you mind checking on the guest book table? I want to make sure it's positioned perfectly for photos." Another task, another errand, another gentle dismissal from the inner circle. I spent the next 2 hours troubleshooting minor issues and ensuring everything ran smoothly. When I finally made it back upstairs to get ready myself, Emma was putting on her jewelry, a stunning diamond set that Tyler had given her as a wedding gift. "You look incredible, Em," I said genuinely. "This is going to be the most beautiful wedding." "Thanks to you," she said, but there was something distant in her voice. "Madison, I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't take it the wrong way." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Well, Tyler's family is very traditional, very formal, and they have certain expectations about how things should go." She was looking at me through the mirror rather than directly. "I was wondering if maybe you could help coordinate things during the reception. You know, make sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes. You want me to work at your wedding?" "Not work exactly, just help out. You know this event better than anyone. And honestly, it would take so much pressure off me if I knew someone I trusted was making sure everything was perfect." The room felt smaller suddenly. The other bridesmaids were pretending not to listen, but I could feel their attention. "Emma, I'm your cousin. I'm a guest at your wedding." "Of course you are. But you're also the person who made all this possible. Think of it as protecting your investment." She finally turned to look at me directly. Please, Madison. This day has to be perfect. Tyler's family is watching everything, judging everything. If something goes wrong, I stared at her, really seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in months. The desperation was real, but underneath it was something else, something that looked uncomfortably like calculation. Fine, I said quietly. I'll help coordinate. You're the best, she said, turning back to the mirror. Oh, and Madison? Maybe wear something a little more understated? You don't want to draw attention away from the bride. I looked down at my dress. An elegant navy blue number I'd carefully chosen to be appropriate for a formal wedding. It was beautiful but not flashy, expensive but not ostentatious. Exactly what a well-dressed guest should wear. This dress is perfectly appropriate, Emma. Of course it is. I just meant… Well, you know how Tyler's family is about propriety. No, I didn't know. Because until that moment, I'd thought I was going to be introduced as beloved family, not hidden away like an embarrassment. The ceremony was beautiful. I watched from the back, having been assigned to ensure the photographer got all the right shots and that the ushers seated people correctly. Emma glowed as she walked down the aisle, and Tyler's face lit up when he saw her. Whatever else was happening, their love seemed genuine. During the cocktail hour, I circulated among the guests, checking on details and solving small problems. I was good at it. My professional skills translated well to event management. But with each passing hour, I felt less like family and more like staff. The breaking point came during dinner. I was standing near the kitchen entrance, coordinating with the catering manager about the timing for the next course, when Emma approached with a silver serving tray in her hands. Madison, she said with a bright smile, maybe you can help in the kitchen. The words were spoken loudly enough that the nearby tables could hear, including the head table where Tyler's family was seated. Mrs. Wellington looked over with raised eyebrows, as did Tyler's father and several other family members. Emma held out the tray with the same gesture someone might use to hand a task to hired help. The moment crystallized everything. 18 months of family helping family. $53,000 of temporary loans. Months of being gradually repositioned from beloved cousin to useful assistant. I looked at Emma's expectant face, then at the Wellington family watching our interaction with polite interest, then down at the serving tray being offered to me like a symbol of my place in this hierarchy they'd all apparently agreed upon. That's when I smiled, not the confused, hurt smile I'd been wearing all day, not the patient, accommodating smile I'd perfected over months of funding someone else's dreams. This was something different, something that made Emma's expression falter slightly. I pulled out my phone. Actually, Emma, let me make a quick call first. Madison, what are you… I was already dialing. The number connected on the second ring. Riverside Country Club, this is James. James, this is Madison Carter. I need you to shut it all down. Now. The words carried across the reception area. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. I'm sorry, Ms. Carter. Could you repeat that? The Carter event. Shut down the entire event immediately. Cut the music, turn off the ambient lighting, and have your staff stop all service. Ma'am, are you certain? This is a wedding reception with over 200 guests. I'm certain. Do it now. I ended the call and looked back at Emma, who was staring at me with her mouth slightly open, the serving tray still extended in her frozen hands. Madison, what did you just do? Around us, I could see the confusion beginning to spread as the catering staff received their instructions. The band finished their current song and didn't start another. The ambient lighting that had been creating such a romantic atmosphere began to dim. Tyler appeared at Emma's side, his face a mask of controlled panic. What's happening? Why is everything stopping? I maintained my calm smile, the one I used in boardrooms when delivering quarterly reports that no one wanted to hear. I gave you a fairy tale, I said clearly, making sure my voice carried to the nearby tables where the Wellington family was watching with growing alarm. I can take it away. The serving tray clattered to the floor as Emma's hands started to shake. Madison, please, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking, I said, that it's time everyone learned who really financed this wedding. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 guests sat frozen in their chairs as the reality of what I'd just said began to sink in. The elegant reception hall, which moments before had been filled with laughter and celebration, now felt like a courtroom where the verdict was about to be read. Tyler's father, Robert Wellington Sr., stood up from the head table. His voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Young lady, I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but this is highly inappropriate." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder I'd been carrying all day. Insurance, I'd told myself, though I never imagined I'd actually need it. Inside were copies of every contract, every receipt, every bank transfer that had made this fairy tale possible. "Mr. Wellington," I said, walking toward the head table with the confidence that comes from having irrefutable documentation, "I think there's been some confusion about who's been paying for your son's wedding." Emma grabbed my arm. "Madison, don't do this. Please." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then directly into her eyes. "Let go of me, Emma." Something in my voice made her release her grip immediately. Tyler moved to stand beside his new wife, his face pale but his voice steady. "I'm sorry, but who exactly are you?" The question hit like a physical blow. After 18 months of funding his engagement, his bachelor party, his rehearsal dinner, and his wedding, Tyler Wellington III didn't even know my name. "I'm Madison Carter," I said clearly, "Emma's cousin, and according to these contracts, I'm also the person who paid for your wedding." I opened the folder and began laying documents on the head table where everyone could see them. "Riverside Country Club venue contract, $15,000 deposit signed by Madison Carter, final payment of $22,000 paid by Madison Carter through Carter Events LLC. Mrs. Wellington leaned forward to examine the papers. "What is this?" "Elegance Catering Contract," I continued, placing the next document down. $12,000 for upgraded organic menu and premium service, paid in full by Madison Carter. Tyler picked up one of the contracts, his hands slightly shaking. "Emma, what is this? You told me your family was handling the wedding expenses." "Botanica Floral Design," I went on methodically. $8,000 for ceremony and reception arrangements. Continental String Quartet, $6,000. Aperture Photography, $4,000 for engagement and wedding packages. Each contract landed on the table with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet room. Emma's mother, Aunt Linda, appeared at my shoulder. "Madison, honey, maybe we should discuss this privately." "No." My voice cut through her attempt at damage control. "We've had 18 months of private discussions. It's time for some public transparency." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, tilting the screen so Tyler could see the transaction history. "These are the payments, Mr. Wellington. Every single one traceable back to my accounts. Your rehearsal dinner at the Fairmont Hotel last night? $8,000. Also me." The color drained completely from Tyler's face. He looked at Emma with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hurt, confusion, and something that might have been disgust. "Emma," he said quietly, "you told me your family had money. You said your cousin was successful, but that your father's business had paid for the wedding." "I never said my father paid." "You absolutely did," Tyler's mother interrupted sharply. "You specifically mentioned your father's construction company and how proud your family was to host such an elegant celebration." Emma's carefully constructed lies were unraveling in real time. I meant Madison is like family money. She's my cousin, so technically, I said, my voice cutting through her desperate explanations, you committed fraud. You misrepresented your financial situation to your fiancé and his family. You accepted their assumption that you came from means while secretly financing everything through guilt-tripping me into paying for your social climbing expedition. The phrase social climbing expedition landed like a slap. Several of Tyler's relatives exchanged meaningful glances. Uncle Robert, my dad's brother and Emma's father, stepped forward from where he'd been sitting with the extended family. His face was red with embarrassment and anger. "Madison's telling the truth," he said loudly enough for half the room to hear. "Emma's been hitting up Madison for money for months. Linda and I couldn't afford any of this. He gestured around the elegant venue. "We've been working double shifts just to keep our house, and Emma knew it." "Dad, please," Emma started. "No, Emma, this has gone too far." Uncle Robert's voice cracked with emotion. "Madison paid for your engagement party too, and your bridal shower. Hell, she even paid for your wedding dress shopping trip to that fancy boutique in Magnificent Mile." A ripple of shock went through the Wellington family section. Tyler's grandmother, a formidable woman in her 80s who hadn't spoken all evening, fixed Emma with a stare that could have frozen hell. "Young lady," she said in a voice like tempered steel, "are you telling me that you misrepresented your family's financial position throughout this entire courtship?" Emma's makeup was starting to run as tears mixed with carefully applied foundation. "It's not like that. Madison offered to help. She wanted to help." "I wanted to help family," I corrected. "I didn't want to be your secret banker while you paraded around pretending to be something you're not." Tyler was studying the contracts with the kind of focus I recognized from my own work reviewing financial documents. "These are all in your name," he said to me. "All of them. The vendors don't even know Emma exists from a payment perspective." "Because I'm the one with the credit rating and the capital to guarantee payment," I explained. "Emma has worked sporadically for the past 2 years and has approximately $800 in her checking account." "How do you know that?" Emma demanded. "Because you asked me to co-sign for your credit card last month when you maxed out the one you already had buying wedding accessories." The revelation hit Tyler like a physical blow. He sat down heavily in his chair, still staring at the contracts. "Emma, we talked about financial transparency. You said you wanted to build our marriage on complete honesty." "I was going to tell you when." Tyler's voice was rising now, his careful composure finally cracking. "After we were legally married and my family discovered that you'd lied about everything? After you'd successfully infiltrated a family that you clearly see as nothing more than a financial opportunity?" Mrs. Wellington stood up, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Margaret," she said to Tyler's aunt, "call the car. We're leaving." "Mom, wait," Tyler said, but his mother was already gathering her purse. "Tyler, this young woman has perpetrated a fraud against our entire family. She's misrepresented herself, her background, and her circumstances in order to secure a marriage that she clearly views as a business transaction." She looked directly at Emma. "Did you really think we wouldn't eventually discover the truth?" Emma was crying openly now. "I love Tyler. I really love him. Everything else doesn't matter." "Everything else is all that matters," Tyler's father said coldly. "Character matters. Integrity matters. The ability to build a partnership based on mutual respect and honesty matters." He looked at his son. "Tyler, we'll discuss this later, privately." As the Wellington family began to gather their things, the rest of the wedding guests sat in stunned silence. Some were leaving, others were clearly staying for the drama, and a few brave souls were actually approaching me. "Madison?" It was my cousin Sarah, Uncle Robert's oldest daughter. "Is this really true? You paid for all of this?" "Every penny," I confirmed. "But why didn't you tell anyone?" That was the question I'd been asking myself for the past 18 months. Because Emma asked me not to. She said it would embarrass the family if people knew we needed outside help. "Outside help?" Sarah's voice was incredulous. "You're not outside help. You're family." "Apparently not today," I said, glancing toward Emma, who was now being consoled by her bridesmaids. "Today, I was assigned to help in the kitchen." My Aunt Linda approached hesitantly. "Madison, honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," I said firmly, "was mine. I misunderstood my role in this family. I thought I was the successful cousin who could help out during tough times. Turns out I was the convenient ATM who could be hidden away when it was time to impress the in-laws." Tyler had been listening to our conversation while mechanically shuffling through the contracts. Suddenly, he looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Madison," he said quietly, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Emma immediately moved closer to him. "Tyler, whatever you want to say, you can say in front of me." "Actually, I can't," he said, gently but firmly removing her hand from his arm. "Madison, please." We walked a few steps away from the chaos, toward the windows overlooking the country club's golf course. Tyler's hands were shaking slightly as he held the venue contract. "I need to apologize," he said. "Not just for Emma's deception, but for my own assumptions. I should have asked more questions. I should have insisted on meeting the family members who were supposedly funding this wedding." "Tyler, you don't owe me an apology. You were lied to." "I was lied to, yes, but I participated in a dynamic where your contributions were minimized." He looked genuinely ashamed. "When Emma introduced you as someone who helped with coordination, I should have asked what that meant. When my mother made comments about family pitching in, I should have clarified who was actually making sacrifices. It was more self-reflection than I'd expected from someone who'd just discovered his new marriage was built on lies." "The truth is," Tyler continued, "I was so caught up in the idea of marrying someone who seemed to fit perfectly into my family's expectations that I didn't ask enough questions about whether those expectations were realistic or fair." "What are you going to do?" I asked. Tyler looked back toward Emma, who was watching us with obvious anxiety. "I don't know. I love her, but I don't know who she really is. The person I thought I was marrying doesn't exist." Before I could respond, my phone rang. The venue manager. "Ms. Carter, we have a situation. Several vendors are asking about payment for services rendered today. The catering team wants to know if they should continue cleanup, and the band is asking whether they'll be compensated for the full contract despite the early termination." "Hold on," I told him, then looked at Tyler. "Your wife's financial deception is about to become everyone's problem. Those vendors all have contracts with me, not Emma. If this event is truly over, I'm responsible for making sure they're compensated fairly." Tyler's expression shifted to something like horror. "You mean you'll have to pay for a wedding that didn't actually finish?" "I mean, I'll have to pay for a wedding where the bride spent 18 months lying to the groom about who was funding their fairy tale." The full scope of Emma's deception was finally becoming clear to him. Not only had she lied about her family's financial situation, but she'd also created a scenario where I would be left holding the financial responsibility for a wedding that had just imploded. "This is insane," Tyler said. "You're the victim here, but you're still the one who has to clean up the mess." "Welcome to my life for the past 18 months. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the golf course. When he spoke again, his voice was different, more decisive. "No," he said firmly, "this isn't how this ends." He walked back toward the head table where Emma was now surrounded by both families, all talking at once. His voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone, please listen," Tyler said, and the authority in his tone made the entire room fall silent. "I have something to say." Emma looked up at him hopefully. "Tyler, if we could just talk privately." "Emma, you lied to me about everything. Your family's financial situation, your own financial situation, and who was actually making our wedding possible." His voice was steady, but cold. "Madison has been funding our entire relationship while you've been pretending to be someone you're not." "Tyler, please, I'm not finished." He turned to address the room. "Madison Carter has spent over $50,000 of her own money to create what she thought was a family celebration. Instead, she's been systematically excluded, minimized, and today, treated like hired help." Mrs. Wellington, who had been gathering her things to leave, stopped and turned back toward the table. "Furthermore," Tyler continued, "the financial contracts for this event are all in Madison's name, which means she's legally responsible for compensating every vendor here tonight, regardless of what happens to our marriage." He looked directly at his mother. "Mom, Dad, I need to ask something of you, and I'll understand if you say no, but I think our family needs to step up here." Tyler's father raised an eyebrow. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we honor the financial commitment Madison made in good faith. She created this event believing she was helping family. The least we can do is ensure she doesn't suffer financially for Emma's deception." The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Tyler's family exchanged glances. "Tyler," his grandmother said slowly, "are you asking us to pay for a wedding to a woman who defrauded you?" "I'm asking you to pay back a woman who was defrauded by someone I chose to marry." The distinction was subtle but important. Tyler wasn't asking his family to support Emma's lies. He was asking them to correct an injustice. Emma finally found her voice. "Tyler, you can't just— We're married now. We can work through this." Tyler looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Emma, you spent 18 months creating an elaborate fiction about who you are. You manipulated your own cousin into funding a lifestyle you couldn't afford, then tried to hide her contributions so you could maintain a false image." He paused. "That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of behavior." "But I love you." "You love the life you thought you could have with me. There's a difference." Tyler's mother stepped forward. "Madison," she said, addressing me directly for the first time all evening, "my son is right. You've been treated abominably, and our family has been complicit in that treatment through our assumptions and negligence." She opened her purse and pulled out a checkbook. "What was the total cost of this event?" I stared at her in shock. "Mrs. Wellington, that's not necessary." "It absolutely is necessary. You entered into these contracts in good faith, believing you were helping families celebrate. You should not be financially penalized for someone else's deception." She looked around the room. "How much, Madison?" $53,000, I said quietly. Without hesitation, she began writing a check. "Tyler, I believe you mentioned that this young woman also funded other events related to your courtship?" Tyler nodded grimly. "The engagement party, bridal shower, and rehearsal dinner, probably close to $70,000 total." Mrs. Wellington's pen paused. $70,000? She looked at Emma with undisguised disgust. "You allowed your cousin to spend $70,000 on your social climbing expedition." "It wasn't social climbing," Emma protested weakly. "Then what would you call it?" Tyler's Aunt Margaret asked. "You misrepresented yourself to gain access to our family's social and financial circle while secretly financing everything through deception." Mrs. Wellington finished writing the check and handed it to me. "This covers the wedding expenses. Tyler, your father and I will discuss how to handle the additional amounts." "Sty!" I looked down at the check, $53,000, written out to Madison Carter in Mrs. Wellington's precise handwriting. "I can't accept this," I said. "You can and you will," Tyler said firmly. "You're not accepting charity, Madison. You're accepting restitution for fraud." Emma was crying harder now. "Tyler, please, we can fix this. I can change. I can pay Madison back myself." "With what money, Emma?" Tyler asked. "You don't have a job. You don't have savings. You don't have any means of supporting yourself, let alone repaying $70,000. The brutal honesty of his words seemed to break something in Emma. She sank into a chair, her elaborate wedding dress pooling around her like deflated dreams. "I just wanted to fit in," she whispered. "I wanted to be good enough for your family." "You could have been good enough by being honest," Tyler said sadly. "But instead, you chose deception, and you dragged Madison down with you." He turned back to me. "Madison, I need you to know that I'm going to make this right. Not just financially, but personally. You deserve better from this family. All of our families." Looking around the room, I could see the wedding guests beginning to process what had just happened. Some looked shocked, others embarrassed, and a few, particularly my immediate family, looked ashamed. My Uncle Robert approached with tears in his eyes. "Madison, I'm so sorry. I knew Emma was struggling financially, but I had no idea she was manipulating you like this." "She's been doing it for years, Dad," my cousin Sarah added. "Remember when Madison paid for Emma's car repairs and her rent that time she got fired?" The pattern was becoming clear to everyone. Emma hadn't just deceived Tyler's family. She'd been systematically exploiting me for years, and I'd been too trusting to see it. "The question now," Tyler's father said, addressing the room, "is what happens next." Tyler looked at Emma, then back at me. "I think that's up to Madison. She's the one who's been wronged here." All eyes turned to me. For the first time in 18 months, I was being asked what I wanted instead of being told what I should give. I took a deep breath and looked around the room, at Emma in her $53,000 wedding dress, at Tyler's family who had just written a check to clean up someone else's mess, at my own family who were finally seeing the dysfunction they'd been enabling. "What I want," I said clearly, is for everyone to understand that this ends now. No more loans, no more family emergencies, no more guilt trips about what I should do with my money. I looked directly at Emma. You made choices, Emma. You chose to lie, to manipulate, and to use me. Those choices have consequences. Then I turned to Tyler. And Tyler, I appreciate what your family just did, but I want you to understand something. This isn't about money anymore. This is about respect. For 18 months, I was treated like a secret resource instead of a family member. That damage can't be fixed with a check. Tyler nodded solemnly. I understand, and I accept responsibility for my part in that. I folded Mrs. Wellington's check and put it in my purse. I'm going home now. This wedding is over. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear Emma calling after me, but I didn't turn around. My cousin Sarah caught up with me at the door. Madison, are you okay? I thought about the question. For the first time in 18 months, I felt like I could breathe freely. You know what, Sarah? I think I'm going to be better than okay. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I actually believed it.